Hello everybody, it's your non-binary Polygracious E.V.A here, and today we're doing a board of a challenge speed paint video featuring some art that I did for a little challenge over on Instagram. I found this challenge a bit ago called Fungai, I think that's how you say it, which is an art challenge sort of like Drawtober and stuff like that for the month of February, where you draw an artwork each week based off of mushrooms and fungi for the entire month of February. I think I already said that. Maybe I already said that at the very beginning. I forget. But yeah, I wanted to do that. It's by this artist, and it was actually apparently the last one they were doing, so I thought it would be the perfect time to try doing this challenge. I don't have like a super big fascination with mushrooms or anything, but they seem fun to draw, and I thought that'd be cool. I also do love just nature things in general and adding that into my work, so this worked out good for me. For this challenge, I decided to design a new character for it. Well, semi-design. I made this rough design to work with for the entirety of the challenge. There is sort of like a moth-like pixieling character. They got a lot of the traits of normal pixieling, but also kind of none of the other traits that I normally add to my pixelings. They're just like a moth fairy character, basically. And I drew them completely in grayscale because I had the plan on recoloring them for each drawing and making their color palette new for each one. Each little slide in the original post had some references for mushrooms to use, and I decided to use almost all the ones suggested for each one. So I had to look them all up, and I put them in my little reference thing to remember which was which. And I also kept the original slide up as a reference too, because I wanted to base the colors off of the slides. Because I thought the color palettes looked good, then I thought that would work good for each one. This ended up making the first two and the last two look a little similar, which was interesting. But yeah, with all of that preparation done, it was time to get onto the first prompt, which was decay. For decay, I drew the character lying down, maybe dying, with mushrooms sprouting from their ribs that are showing, which I do a lot. I have a weird obsession with drawing the rib cage and no other part of the skeleton. They're also sprouting from their face and around them as well. Drawing all the shrooms took quite a while, especially because I tried to make them look rather detailed here. And actually, this whole piece took a while. It was actually the longest I spent on any of these, which is good because I do really like how it looks in the end. It does kind of make some of the others look a little simpler in comparison because I didn't take nearly as long to draw them, but I am proud of the time spent on this one. Like I said, I placed in the colors based on the color scheme from the original post, and having the character just be grayscale helped a lot with that because I already knew what I wanted the values to be. And after that, I placed in the background first, which was ended up being them lying on a thing of grass with tree roots. And later I would completely forget how to render this. I don't know why. I think it's just been a while since I've rendered grass, so it took me a little bit to remember how I did that, but I eventually ended up remembering how I do that. And the reason why I added the tree roots is so that I could add dabble light later and it would make sense. I used warm colors, which also meant I used warm greens all throughout this, which is something I don't use often. I don't like warmer greens on their own, but I do like using them in combination with other warm colors like reds and oranges. So that's what I did here. And rendering also took quite a while because I don't know, I think I was just having a really fun time rendering and just wanted to take my time with it. I also rendered all the mushrooms in and added a bit more, even more mushrooms that are just like more red, like mushrooms all around. And then I added that dapple light effect. This was really fun, took a really long time, but I had fun with it. The next prompt was fairy tale, and I decided for this one that I would use fairy rings as my main inspiration, which are mushroom circles believed to be traps by fairies. And since this character is a fairy type character, it made perfect sense. I used different types of mushrooms here too, but they aren't as clear, but I did end up drawing a lot of them. This was my first time drawing the entirety of this character, and it was really hard to draw in the wings, but I got there eventually, and I had a really hard time deciding which colors to use specifically for the background. I couldn't decide if I wanted it to be more orange or more teal, but I made my decision to stick with more orange and have the teal be the more pop color you know what I mean, like pop of a different color, after I did some of the rendering on the main character, which yes, did take a little bit because of how I was deciding which colors to use. But after that, I finished the background and the foreground, which took a lot longer than I expected, because of the more complex forest scenery and stuff. And I also added some fairy light sort of things that are actually mushrooms in the trees as well. And those took a little bit too to figure out how to get them sized correctly. And yeah, those end up being like one of the main light sources as well. I also ended up doing a lot of color correcting towards the end, and that ended up making their eyes like very bright and all like the teal elements very bright compared to everything else. But that's okay. I think that works. Kind of gives it a bit more of a menacing feel, which if the tales of the fairy ring is anything to go by, it makes perfect sense. The next prompt was immortal, and I actually took this in a bit of a different direction than I think it was supposed to be for. So it's I went with more of a time theme instead, and I had a different idea initially for this, but I changed it to be an hourglass sort of motif, with the character being stuck in the hourglass, sand running down to convey that time is running out. And I also included a bunch of different mushrooms on the hourglass again, the ones that were recommended for this challenge for this. And this one, the mushrooms also ended up being a lot more detailed, so that's nice, but there weren't as many. And for a bit of this, I had to rely on a reference for the hourglass, which I'm glad I did because I think it looks pretty realistic. And the color scheme of this one ended up being mostly purple with pops of yellow, which works because of the sand being all yellow and then everything else being purple. I think it works quite well. Rendering the sand was fun. I've never rendered sand like this before, trying to figure out how to do it, and I think it ended up looking nice. It was a bit of a challenge to figure out how much of the hourglass I wanted showing, or like the top of the hourglass specifically, because I didn't want too much negative space up top, but I wanted to show that this is in fact an hourglass. And drawing the character went fine. I drew them hunched over, and I had to keep in mind that some of the rendering was going to be covered up by the sand falling down, but that didn't end up being too much of a problem. And I put a mushroom in their hand as well because I just need more mushrooms in there. And overall, this one ended up being alright, but it's kind of my least favorite. Towards the end of this, I felt like something was missing, but I couldn't figure it out, and honestly, I still haven't figured out what exactly is missing from this. It's missing something, I feel like, but I don't know. I still ended up, sharing it and stuff as is because I couldn't figure out what to do with it. And even though it is my least favorite, it's still alright. This whole series, I'm not going to absolutely love all of them, unfortunately, but yeah, just how it turns out. And the final one was the prompt for Cosmic. And for this, I actually had an idea of what I wanted this one to be since the beginning. I went with a scratch art style work with a lot of swooping motions, with the hair going up with smoke, implying that the character is also smoking, which is bad. Don't do that. But it's symbolic. And I made the cigarette a mushroom because I needed more mushrooms. I struggled a bit with the hair because of how curly it is, but I got it. I got it there. I really like how it ended up looking. And usually with my scratch art style art, I usually just stick to doing line art and making it all nice and detailed and scratchy looking and adding color to that. And initially I was going to do that here, but for this I decided to actually add a bit of color and shading, sticking with a cool blue palette. I made the colors subtle, so I didn't put too much there, and I even lowered the opacity of it once I was done with it, and I liked that I did that because it gives it a bit more of a finished look and makes it fit in a bit more with the other artworks, even though it does still stand out a bit. And I had a lot of fun figuring out how to draw the smoke. I ended up using a lot of lead blending modes like glow dodge and add glow, and then towards the end I added some mushrooms around the frame because I almost completely forgot about those. They're supposed to be a sort of glowing mushroom, but they ended up kind of looking just like generic mushrooms. I think I got tired of the mushroom thing towards the end, which is funny because it's the whole point of this challenge was that, but that's okay. And yeah, that was the last artwork of this whole series that I did. This was really fun to do. That it was like a drawing per week thing rather than a drawing per day thing. For all of these, I kind of had in mind like a sort of story that could go with them, and that depending on how you look at each artwork, they could go in a different order for different people. So for example, you could see the artworks going in order of how I drew them, or you can see them going in reverse order, or you can see them as like the fairy ring is the first one, cosmic, then immortal, then decay. Something like that is sort of like it's like either a story of life or a story of death or whatever you want. So I had that in mind while drawing these, and I think that's really cool. So let me know what you think the story of these artworks are. No matter what you think, it's probably right. You can think whatever you want, and it'll be correct. It's up to you to interpret what's going on here. Thank you so much for watching again. As always, thank you to JBizRat for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to support me on Patreon as well, then you can get some early content for my gym tier, and for my sunset tier you can get exclusive stuff like behind the scenes of my animations and exclusive chapters for my comics, stuff like that. You can also check out my Instagram for more artwork and my webtoon and tapas for my comics. And as always, that is it. And that is it from me for this video. I will see you all in the next one. Bye!